not walking. I had a small rock in my foot that I kind of didn't, I didn't pay attention to. So I had a little rock in my foot that I didn't pay attention to, and so I removed it yesterday with a pair of tweezers and some betadine, and yeah, you know, just dug it out of there and just be just fine right now. But anyway, what I'm trying to do today and see if this is working or not. Because I said, I put these settings on public, and the settings are on public. It's not scheduled for a later thing. Hold on a second. Let me take a look here to the. Maybe I gotta look at oh yeah, there we go. Okay, all right. It says we're live. We're live. I want to make sure this is people vlogs, not in pets and animals, because uh, you know people kind of get particular about looking at pets and animals, and they don't like it if you're advertising pets and animals when you're doing a people vlogs type of thing. So yes, I was managed to change that, and right now it is what time is it? It is 3:45 in the morning, Thailand, Friday morning, right? 100% Friday morning. I got to double check because yesterday I thought it was. I thought yesterday was Friday and today was, but whatever. I think it's Friday today. Let me double check. I want to double check, make sure I got my my days. Yes, it is Friday, August 8th, 3:46 in the morning on Friday in northern Thailand, and yeah, well, I just have like a sit down and talk, and ask me any kind of questions that you feel like you want to ask me. Um, hey, where are you from? Originally, I was saying, originally I was born in Brooklyn, New York, but I moved to Asia when in my 20s, in my mid 20s. Aiden, how you doing, Frank? Aiden Franklin, how you doing? Good morning. How's everything? What's going on with you? So, by the time I moved here, I was still pretty young. I'm 55 now, and I wouldn't really consider myself American per se. Like, I mean, I spent, you know, all, more than half of my adult life, my half of my waking life in Thailand. So I would say, like, um, well, you got me. I couldn't even answer those questions. I live in, I live in Thailand. We live in the country. I don't even like look at the TV or anything like that. I'm sorry. I wish I could give you an answer about that, but it has nothing to do with me. I'm, my wife and I, we do rice farming, and we do a little YouTubing, and we try to have a little bit of fun, and you know, uh, we play guitar music, and we exercise, and we take care of animals. Basically, like, what we do is take care of animals, and that's all we do. You know, we don't have anything to do with politics. We don't have anything to do with the United States. We don't have anything to do with any country in the world other than the country that we're living in now, because this is where we are. We live here in Thailand. I mean, you know, um, I guess, right? I mean, here's my second pair of glasses. So, yeah, I dug that stone out of my foot, and so I won't be walking today. But we have to sit down and talk about whatever whatever you like to talk about. Any questions you have for me. I'm 55 years old. I've been living here in Thailand since I was about 26, 27 years old. And I do various things. I was a writer for a period of time. I used to write for a magazine, and I used to play backgammon for a living. I did some trading for a little while. I traded stocks and options and stuff like that. But that wasn't here in the United States. I did that before I left the United States for good. And that was actually in 2001, right, when the towers came down. After that came down, I just said, you know what, I'm out of here. I don't know what life is all about. I want to learn about life. And so I decided that I literally took the next plane out from the United States. Not because I was running away from the United States or anything like that. It was because I wanted to have this like awakening about life. I just saw all these people lose their lives. A lot of my friends lost their lives. People that I knew, and I just couldn't find a rhyme or a reason about what life was about. So I became sort of like on this quest to go through the world and try to learn as much as I could about other people, and also show that I'm a good person, that at least I try to be a good person, and I have values, they used to be based in the Christian values, but over time I've studied the Quran, I've studied the Eightfold Noble Path, I've studied many different religions and stuff, and basically it all boils down to one thing to me, and that is don't steal, don't lie, don't kill, don't engage in bad talk about people. These are all wrapped up in the same sort of thing. But a study of history and stuff like that, kind of like, opens your eyes up to certain things, which I'm not sure that some of the deeper research into the religions and stuff like that might not be pertinent to talk about right now, because I have very strong feelings. I don't know if they're feelings, but like when I read some things about like the Jews and about the Arabs and stuff like that, and their history was a bit what they used to find acceptable, and still do to this day, I found unacceptable. So I guess that's to suffice it just a little bit, just to like scratch the surface just a little bit. So I studied Buddhism, Theravada Buddhism, and I studied with some monks, from monks, and read and learned a lot of stuff like that. But you learn an awful lot by yourself. In fact, I'm pretty certain that most people learn the most when they're on their own. And there's a very simple answer for that. The reason is that if you're on your own, you have to use your brain, right? You have to make the decision. Nobody else is making the decisions for you. You might have lessons that people have taught you and stuff like that in the past, but you're going to draw on that and then go through the process of learning when you're alone, because it's just you, right? It's just you. You got to learn how to do it, right? Like somebody might tell me how to play the guitar over here. They say, listen, man, you gotta hit, a certain note, whatever, But then if I don't hit that note when I'm on my own, I haven't learned anything, But that process of learning happens when I'm alone, and I'm fiddling around trying to figure out, play some scales or some chords and stuff like that, and like that, and that's where You know, that's where I find that the learning is. Or like if you're reading a book or something like that, you read a book and you're interested in the topic, and then you pause and you think about what you're reading. You know, like, does this make sense? A lot of times when you're watching a movie or a documentary and stuff like that, that's the same thing. Like, you know, you watch it, and like, as soon as you have like that little like inkling in your head, like, is that right? You can pause it. You look at it, and you say, I'm not sure. I'm really not sure that is right. You know what I mean? Like you could look at somebody and see what they're talking about, and then if you really start to think about it, you know, a lot of times, you know, is just like total rubbish. You know, people just spouting out off of their mouth about nothing. You know, just to hear their own voices speak, right? But anyway, today is not the day to go exercising, even though I miss it dearly. I will tell you what I did though, and I'm so ashamed of myself. I ate 2 tubs of ice cream. They were in the freezer. They were sitting there, you know. I saw them, these 2 tubs of ice cream, and I said, "Wow, those look so delicious." You know, and I opened up the first one, and I thought, "Wow, my wife was so nice. My wife and my daughter were so nice to buy this ice cream. You know, they must have thought that I wanted ice cream or something like that. Like I somehow, maybe I even felt like I deserved a treat or something like that. So I started eating it. I was scooping up the ice cream with the chocolate chips and stuff like that, and I'm eating it and I'm eating it, and you know, and then all that ice cream was gone, right? All right, and there's still one more tub in the freezer, right? So I didn't hit it right away, you know. I just like, okay, well, I ate that thing. Let's, because like yesterday was a great day. Well, after I'd finished exercising, I took a shower and everything like that, and I put on my clothes. My clothes were looser. My pant line was looser. I actually needed a belt to keep my pants up and stuff like that. And I was like, man, I'm really losing this weight. I'm doing the exercise and everything like that. This is working out great. And then I discovered that pint of ice cream. And when I discovered the pint of ice cream, actually it was more than a pint. It was probably like 2 pints. And I ate it. And then I found a rock in my foot. And so I won't be exercising to get that sugar out of my system until tomorrow. You know. But whatever. That doesn't mean we can't be productive today. We can be productive today in this space that we are here, you know, talking and chatting and everything like that. And it's a beautiful morning, even though the sunrise hasn't risen yet. It should rise in about 2 hours. Sunrise is in about 2 hours. But I'll tell you what I do have. I have a fantastic cup of coffee. I have a fantastic cup of coffee. I have content that I can work on. So I don't know if I told you guys about the content that I'm working on. I'm working on sort of like, I'm an amateur historian, so I enjoy working through history of how the world got its borders and stuff like that. So like there were major events that happened. Obviously, like if you go through different times in history, different times created different borders and stuff like that. But the time that I'm focusing on right now is the time after the fall of the Roman Empire, right? And that starts off after the 700 years or so of the Muslim occupation of the Iberian Peninsula, and that those like the Ottoman Empire and stuff like that, and then it was starting with the period of what's called the Reconquista, which was when Spain and Portugal fought to make the Iberian Peninsula one country. Well, actually two countries, but two countries unified together into two monarchies, and to expel the Muslim caliphate from the Iberian Peninsula. And how that series of events that happened in a very short period of time, from the years 1450 AD to the years up until we're talking about the inception. We're not talking about from 1450 AD up to like 1800. Now we're not talking about that. We're talking about from 1450, from the invention of the triangular sails, which would allow ships to sail against the wind, which would allow Portuguese ships to be the first European ships to round the Gulf of Good Hope and on the southern Horn of Africa, right? How it took such a short period of time for technological advances to allow that to happen, but there's also an incredible amount of luck that the Portuguese and the Spanish had in order to be so successful in their conquest of Southeast Asia. And that is like a whole issue, a whole slew of things, a whole bunch of different things which allowed the Portuguese to do it. It's like, for example, I'll give you an example, the Black Plague. Well, the Black Plague was from around 1350 to 15 something. So during that period of time, the Ming Dynasty, which had been the Chinese Ming Dynasty, which had trade all the way down in Southeast Asia, they had armadas and admirals. The most famous admiral you probably ever heard of was Zheng He, right? And he was very famous Chinese admiral, and he would, go down, and he ended up defeating some pirate by the name of Cheng Yui or something like that. I forget his name exactly, the pirate's name. But what happened is that the Ming Dynasty decided, we're not going out to sea anymore. We're focusing on internal activities, and this started from 1350 to around, into the mid to late 1500s, 16th century. And you have to ask yourself a question: why did China do that? Why? Well, they said, one of the answers that you're given if you're just reading some random history textbook is that China decided to work on internal affairs. Oh, great. Okay, well, what does that mean? That's not a history book. That's just some sort of somebody writing something down because they don't have an answer to. So I want to know the answer, right? So then I look further into it, right? And you start to draw a timeline. So a lot of history, like if you're trying to suss out history, you work it out like a detective. You need a timeline. Timeline is key to solving all the events that humans are doing. So, detectives and historians have an awful lot in common. They're piecing together the pieces through time. So, from 1350 to the late 16th century, there was the Black Plague. That might have been a reason why China closed their borders, because they had an epidemic, which we now know that there was a pestilence, an epidemic inside of China called the Black Plague. But it wasn't just in China, it was in Europe as well. I mean, like something like 25% of the world's population died from it and stuff. But at that time, the Portuguese, who I guess hadn't been affected by the Black Plague, were now sailing and inventing new technologies to sail from Portugal, because Portugal and Spain were the ones, they were the absolute leaders in the world. They had a jump start of 100, at least 100 years over everybody in naval power. They were the most powerful countries in the world at that time. They were going to South America, North America, and the East, and Africa, and stuff like that. And the Portuguese and the Spanish, they even signed a treaty called the Tordesillas, which was basically signed by the Pope, saying Spain had the rights to all the lands in the West, and that Portugal had the rights to the lands in the East. This way, they wouldn't create a conflict of, a conflict and have to, feel like they had to go to war, even though they're on the same peninsula, Portuguese and Spanish. I mean, it's a wonder, and I'm going to find out one of these days why Portugal and Spain actually stayed two separate countries with two different languages on the same peninsula. It's a kind of a conundrum to me, but we'll figure that out. Anyway, that's not the point of history that we're at right now. The point of history we're at was, why was it that the Portuguese were so successful in once they managed to get around the Cape of Good Hope, or the Horn of Africa, right? That was Bartholomew Diaz is the first Portuguese to make it, but he only went around the Horn. He didn't go around the Horn and then find the passage to Asia or India. He just went around the Horn and he went back, because his ships were too small. The kinds of ships that he had were called caravels, right? And these caravels were a little bit smaller, and they were really good for sailing up and down the coastline, right? They're really good for sailing up and down the coastline for discovery and stuff like that. And that was an invention that was sort of fathered by what Portugal, by the man Portugal sort of refers to as their father of navigation, and his name is Henry the Navigator, and he lived in the late 14th century and early 15th century. But he wasn't a sailor. He was just somebody who knew or had a vision that improvisations in sailing were critical to the success of his country, or the success of mercantile things to sail around the world, and trade with them or conquer them, and they did both of those things. But it's an amazing coincidence, because a lot of it has to do with coincidence. Like the Portuguese, they never would have been so successful if there wasn't a coincidence, right? And what was that coincidence? That coincidence was that China, with its huge fleet of armed ships with cannons and all sorts of things, had made a decision, they made a decree that no commercial or naval ships would be leaving and going south into Southeast Asia and then back up to China. And they held on to that for about 200 years. And the reason they held on to that was, one explanation that's given is that they were taking care of the Mongol threat. Well, the Mongol threat was long since dissipated, because they were much stronger in the 11th century, 10th and 11th century, and 12th century. But we're talking about the 16th century, right? So that's one of the things that China was taking care of its internal affairs. What do we say here? The Portuguese are low on the ships compared to most of the world. It was their banking skills that made the all right. Well, actually, I will disagree with you on that statement because the Portuguese very much so innovated ships so that they could travel around the world. Their banking systems, right, has to do something with called the Reconquista. So for over 700 years, the Iberian Peninsula was controlled by the Moors. Yet, while it was being controlled by the Moors, there was the class of Jews who were in the peninsula, the Iberian Peninsula. Now, during this time that the Moors were allowed to the Moors were conquering the Iberian Peninsula, Jews were allowed to have Christian slaves, and they had a lot of them. Jews were kept around by the Muslims because they used them for bureaucratic and accounting type fields, because that's something that is built into their religion, right? It was the Christians who were anti-slaves, right? But it was the Jews and the Arabs who were the slavers of Africa, the slavers of the Mediterranean, the Berbers and stuff like that. You know, these are the people that practiced modern slavery. You know, bringing slaves to South America and North America. Okay, so if you want to get your history facts right, I would suggest that you start studying a little bit before you make some ideas. But anyway, let's get back to how is it that Portugal and Spain got the jump on the rest of the world? They had a technological advantage that gave them a naval superiority over the rest of the world for over 100 years, which meant that they were able to sail to North America, South America. They were able to sail to the East Indies, India, and all Southeast Asia, because they modified their ships. They modified their ships. They were the first ones to do it. You know, and yes, they were motivated by getting gold and spice and slaves. That's what they were motivated by. Okay, they're motivated by money and sex. That's what the main motivations of humans is: money, power, and sex. That's the way it's always been. So anyway, so the Portuguese were able to make their way to the Southeast Asia. But the point that I'm trying to make up, I'll tell you how they modified their ships. Number one, they had triangular sails, which were called lanteens, right? And lanteens had been around for a longer period of time, like they'd been around for a couple hundred years, but they were used on the coasts of Portugal and Spain as small, like more like hobby ships and stuff like that, right? So it was Henry the Navigator who asked the artisans, because Henry the Navigator was the fourth son or the third son of King João of Portugal, and he was what they call a patron of maritime affairs. Well, yeah, right. So if you had square sails, you could only go with the wind when the wind was blowing. But if you have a triangular sail, you can sail against the wind in a zigzag form. So you can actually get enough energy in your sail that allows you to sail against the wind. And that is how the Portuguese were able to round the Cape of Good Hope. when no other Europeans had done it. Now I say Europeans because for hundreds of years, if not thousands of years, the Muslims and the Indians had been trading up and down the east coast of Africa, right? And there's this map called the Fra Mauro map, and it was made in 1450 by an Italian cartographer, commissioned by Henry the Navigator to make as an accurate map as possible of the world. And in this map, made in 1450, before supposedly any European went around the Cape of Good Hope in these caravels, Fra means like friar, like father, as a priest. Fra Mauro from Italy, who was commissioned by Henry the Navigator of Portugal, almost to the detail shows the Horn of Africa, and then goes up to the east coast of Africa and the Strait of Hormuz. You can see it all. You look it up. Fra Mauro map. F-A-R F-R-A, Fra Mauro, M-A-U-R-O. And if you look it up, compare it with a modern day map of the world, and you look at that map from 1450, you will see that they had ships that were actually going down in the Cape, but they weren't European ships. They were Muslim and they were Indian ships. Good. Hope the southern seas are terrible. That's why they had the Panama Canal and canal through Egypt. Nobody wants to sail through the south. Yeah, well, so the reason for that, right? The reason people didn't want to sail through the south is, so what happens? What happens when you get to the south? Think about it for a second. When you get to the south of Africa, right? Let's say this is like, triangular. Down here is the south of Africa. Over here is the Atlantic Ocean, right? And on this side is the Pacific Ocean, right? We can agree on that, right? Well, you know that the Pacific Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean don't mix, right? That they're two separate bodies of water. So what happens is that when you get down to that part of the southernmost part of the continent of Africa, you get to this water, right, where it becomes brackish water. You can actually see the line of Pacific Ocean and Atlantic Ocean, right? And that water that is now like kind of floating like oil and vinegar with each other, and that and from there comes the term called the doldrums, right? D-U-L-D-R-U-M-S, the doldrums, because when they get to the south, that very south, if there is not a storm, you do not have east and west winds that are going to blow you through. So it's at that time, with using sail power, it was very difficult to round the Horn. And that was not just the Horn in Africa, the Cape of Good Hope, but also the Horn in South America, right? Very difficult to remember. The two oceans are separated, and that's the point where they actually meet. And you can look on the internet, and you will see the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. They don't mix. They're two separate entities, and you can actually see a difference in their color. So that's the South Ocean has no land to stop it. Well, I don't know exactly about that. The South Ocean has, the end of Africa, but the Antarctic is down there, and there are also other islands. Like if you talk about the South, like there's Australia, right? Australia, New Zealand, Tasmania, and stuff like that. There's the Pacific Ocean. In the Pacific Ocean, you have Hawaii, you have the Polynesian Islands, and stuff like that. So there's really a whole host of land structures. So I'm not gonna say that. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but from my understanding is it is not that there's no land that stops the South Oceans. It's that the oceans don't mix. They're separate bodies. So there are five oceans, supposedly five oceans on the planet, seven continents, right? And none of the five oceans are mix, right? So they're even like considered by some biologists and oceanologists, what's the name? The oceanologists, oceanographics, and stuff like that. That these are actually living organisms. That like the Pacific is an actual living organism, and that the Atlantic Ocean is a living organism. I mean, that's why you have whales that live inside of the Pacific Ocean. They're the same kind of whale, but they don't speak the same language because they have language, right? They don't speak the same language as whales that live in the Atlantic Ocean. Or you have the whales up in the Bering Sea in the north, by the North Pole. They don't speak the same languages, so they all have different dialects and stuff like that, which is pretty amazing if you think about it, like how diverse and so little we really know. I mean, we're learning a lot more now because we are at an age of, this is like, if you thought that like so the 1600s and 1500s were like the age of the Renaissance, right? And that was like the rekindling of learning and stuff like that. So like before that you had the like the late Middle Ages, the Middle Ages, and the early Middle Ages. And before that you would have like the Greeks, the Romans, and stuff like that, the age of philosophy and stuff like that, right? So when the Renaissance came, that was like a whole new people were starting to learning more about the world around them and stuff like that with Galileo and all sorts of things, But that was an extremely like quick period of time that humans were able to develop technology, but it's nothing compared to today, these days now. And the amount of learning and at the breakneck speed that we are able to learn, which is absolutely so fast, so quick, we don't even know. Humans are, and our technology are learning so quickly, we don't even know what the ramifications of the information that we're learning is. And that means, are we learning things that we should we really be learning some of the things that we're learning, or are the things that we're learning leading ultimately to our demise? That's the big question, and there's nobody, really nobody has an answer to that question, which is why it's so interesting, because you could be an astrophysicist with all sorts of degrees, but there's no answer to that question. And that's why it's so much fun to be an amateur academic like myself and like you guys are. Everybody who's watching this is an amateur academic, because you have questions too, right? You want to learn about the world around you and stuff like that, and it's just filled with very interesting things. And in saying that, I will say one thing, is that if you lead a life of wanting to learn things, learning about your environment, even if it's just things like picking up the guitar to learn how to play the guitar, even if you don't play it all that good or whatever, you could become like the greatest guitar player in the world, or you could just play for fun. The fact of the matter is that you're playing the guitar. Is the point? The point is not necessarily how good you play it. Is that you yourself are playing your guitar and you're having fun and you're enjoying it, and the people around you are having a good time too. And that's really one of the keys to life, you know. At least as I see it, the way I see it, you know. But yeah, man. So that's like a big thing. I gotta tell you, I was so disappointed when I had to, when I saw that ice cream in the fridge, and I went in I'm gonna show you. I'll show you. I'll prove it to you. Oh my God, my wife is not gonna be happy about this, but you see this? That's the top of the ice cream thing that I ate. I wasn't supposed to eat that. I'm trying to lose weight. You know what I mean? And she told me something. I told her last night. I said, "Listen, don't buy sweets, don't buy ice cream, don't bring any custards in the house and everything like that." And she got mad at me. She says, "Why? You think that you're the only one who wants? What if I want sweets? What if I want to eat something sweet? And what, if I feel like having a custard or something like that?" And I was like, "Man, you're right. I can't just dictate no ice cream, no things in our house and tell everybody what they can eat and what they can't eat and stuff like that. No, I just have to control what I eat." And yesterday I didn't control what I ate. I had that pint of ice cream, and I can kind of feel it a little bit around my waist, and especially because I didn't go exercise because I had to dig out that rock out of my foot, you know, put a little betadine in there, and it'll be just fine, you know. But tomorrow we'll be back out on a walk. That's for sure. I don't know. If you look at some of the videos that were posted a few hours ago, my wife posted a video of me of how loud I snore. If you're curious, if you think that your husband is a loud snorer, I don't know. Try to compare it and see who's snore. If I'm a louder snorer than your husband or your wife. Because I have news for you. I got a secret for you. Women snore too. What's this? Hold on. Not all the chat's coming through the whole thing. So hope the Southern Seas and so on. So you're right. This is all from Gene 304. So they have different accents. Is what the science? Yeah, right. So the whales and the orcas and the dolphins and stuff like that, is like, yeah, they definitely have they have accents and stuff like that, and they may or may not understand most of what each other said. And then you say, "Much love from you. I appreciate that. Much love to you, my brother." And then it took you a long time to switch your snacks to bananas and nuts. Yes, well, nuts have high caloric thing, but here's the thing. I didn't have that ice cream. You know what I was eating? I was eating apples, right? And I ate that apple. When I ate that apple, I was like, there's no candy in no man-made candy tastes better than an apple. At least that's the way I felt. Like the fruit, that if there is this great design of God to have created all this for us, man certainly has not created anything that tastes better than an apple or another form of fruit. Okay, if you snore, you have to get that checked out. Yeah, I get it checked out. I have to lose weight. I gotta lose weight, my brother. Hello there, lovely to meet you all. What's the topic here? Well, Harry, we've been talking about a number of things, but one of the things we were talking about was the 16th century and what were the factors that made Spain and Portugal such leaders and in naval superiority that lasted for over 100 years. And that conversation we talked about that, and that started leading to transposed into talking about health. Yeah, it was about history, but we talk about anything you want. Henry, why don't you tell us what you want to talk about? Why don't you give us a snippet of knowledge? What you got for us? If Harry's still there. Well, okay. So anyway, so the thing was, my big thing is this. The big thing that what would you like to know? Well, one thing I'd like to know is why were the Portuguese so successful in conquering and in colonizing Southeast Asia? And I have a pretty good idea why, but I'm curious. Why do you think that the Portuguese were so successful in colonizing and conquering Southeast Asia, which created borders in the world which are still felt today? So what happened 500 years ago, 600 years ago, still has a tremendous effect on the borders of countries today. So why was this small country, Portugal, so successful? You want to see the cat? Well, she's a cat, so she's she's sort of moving around. She's my favorite cat because she's like, kind of sleeps with me, but sleeps at my feet. Okay, I'm more 1500 to England's, and I would like to learn too. Well, in the 1500s in England, what was happening? I'll tell you what was happening in England. England wasn't doing shit. I mean, they were doing a little bit. They had John Cabot. John Cabot was actually Giovanni Cabot, and John Cabot was commissioned by Henry VIII to sail, right? But that was in the 1500s. Now, if you remember, Christopher Columbus, Amerigo Vespucci, Vasco da Gama, all these Spanish and Italians had already circumnavigated the world. They'd been to South America, North America, and everything like that. So England was very late in joining the game in this. They were late, right? I mean, like there's an amazing amount of coincidences that helped shape the world that we live in today. Like, for example, by all rights, all of North America, all of South America should probably be speaking Spanish and Portuguese. Like, why weren't the Spanish and Portuguese successful in holding on to that territory? That's a big question, right? Well, something obviously happened, right? Spanish and the Portuguese dropped the ball on that one, right? So in the 1500s, what was happening? Well, in the 1500s, I will tell you this. Who was King of England in 1500? Harry. Right. Well, yeah, of course. There was establishment of civilizations that emigrated over Europe and stuff like that. Obviously, things, the diffusion of knowledge and stuff like that. But the point is this: is that you said you're into English history, and you said 1500s. So my question to you is, who was King of England in the 1500s? Yes, Henry. Right, Henry VIII. Henry VIII was King of England, and he screwed up the whole country. He had 8 wives. He made the Church of England. He banished the Pope and everything like that. So what happened is England, because of Henry VIII, because the guy was a megalomaniac, crazy guy. I mean, he was literally crazy for whatever reason. Some say he got a spear in his eyes and that made him crazy. I just think that he was just straight up crazy, to begin with, But that guy was straight. He like murdered, like executed like 3 of his wives and sent one to a nunnery, and one marriage was annulled and all that. They had internal problems. England had internal problems at that time. Now, but there's another thing. There's another thing that was happening when you say the 1500s, but it's actually, we're talking the 15th century, right? Is that what else was happening in the world at that time? The Black Plague. The Black Plague was a big thing, right? Killed off 50% of the world or whatever it was, right? But the Portuguese and the Spanish, I would have to do more research to be able to speak more definitively on it. I don't think that they had the same afflictions as like the Italians and the Mediterranean areas. What? He went back, said there are major cities throughout the Nile, and then went back and there were no big cities. Thought him a liar. Who are you talking about? Gene. What are you talking about, Gene? Who was the guy that sailed the Nile? Are you thinking about the guy who sailed the Amazon? Because I'm pretty sure that if anybody sailed the Nile, is indisputable that they saw civilizations. I think you're talking about the Amazon. I think. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you are talking about the Nile. But I know there was a guy that sailed up the Amazon, and he was like, yeah, right. He sailed up the Amazon, and he started talking about all those discoveries and everything. Oh, they have a city over here, and they have commerce and agriculture and all that. And then 100 years later, after he had done it and he had documented it all down in parchment paper, brought it back to Spain, back to Portugal and stuff like that, and he had that in writing. And then they sent other ships out, and when those ships went out, they were all gone. Well, there was a reason why they were all gone. And one of those reasons that they were all gone was disease. Europeans brought disease with them that spread just out. I mean, in 100 years, you could just make. That's why immunity was built to this day here. Well, yeah, immunity is a big thing, and not everybody survives, So, when you think about it, if you put a town back then, or even a city, on the banks of the Amazon, in 100 years, that thing's going to be gone. I mean, practically gone. Now they're finding it with the LiDAR. They're flying over and they find with LiDAR and all that stuff. All these forgotten settlements. And they found out that the Amazon had this gigantic city filled with millions of people, just like the Sahara. The Sahara, 1,000 years ago, I think it was a lush green area filled with people. So what's underneath the Sahara? What's underneath the sands of the Sahara? I forget what his name is too, but we can look it up, but I forgot his name. His name is obviously certainly noteworthy. He's not the same guy that was looking for the city of Zed. Remember that guy? The guy who was looking for the city of Zed? Right? It was supposed to be, he was he was trying to find gold, and he and his son, an English guy, he ended up going, and they probably got eaten by cannibals. Right? You know who I'm talking about? So one of the things is that one of the things controls our versions of history and everything like that is the media. And what I say by the media is Hollywood. Hollywood. A lot of the movies like that came out were controlled by the United States. And because the United States is an English speaking country, a lot of these English speaking language movies came out and they went out all over the world, and that became like the lingua franca. You know, all of a sudden everybody's believing what the movies said. But these are movies. These weren't documentaries. These were movies made by people, you know, to sell movies. Well, you know, I guess Harry could do, everybody does what they can, right? Maybe he's out there looking at the encyclopedia right now trying to, who was that guy that sailed up the thing? I mean, I could do it. Oh, there's Harry. Okay, yes, Harry. We want to know the name of the explorer, one of the first explorers who sailed up the Amazon River, who documented civilization, cities, agriculture on the banks of the Nile. And then 100 years later, when they sent somebody on his, you know, because he had written everything down, what was his name? What was that explorer's name? You got us, Harry? You could look. Can you look that up? I mean, like, my hands aren't free right now, but if you could look it up, who was that? Who was that? It was a Spanish. I believe it was Spanish, but he could have been Portuguese. He was either Spanish or Portuguese, and he went up the Nile and then did his old documentary, like documenting all the civilizations. No, we're talking about the Amazon, and I don't think that the Vikings or the Chinese or the Christians made it to the Amazon at that time. We're talking about the Amazon River in South America. Jeans, I'm not sure Henry's gonna. I mean, he may be semi-paying attention. Well, I certainly don't believe that the Vikings ever made it to the Amazon. They might have. We would not know, right? I mean, I guess. But they made it to Newfoundland. They made it to Greenland. They made it to, you know, the northeast coast of North America. That we know for a fact. You know. But we're talking about the Amazon River in South America, which runs through Brazil and other countries. Who was the explorer? I mean, you know what? I'm gonna have to type it up. You know what? Now I'm gonna have to look it up. I have my computer here. I'm gonna look it up. Let me type this up. I'm gonna find out who this was. Who was the first European explorer to document civilizations in the Amazon, in South America, along the Amazon River? Okay, all right. No, it's not Christopher Columbus. Okay, the voyage. The first European explorer to document civilizations along the Amazon rivers was Francisco de Orellana. There you have it, his name. Francisco de Orellana. And in 1541, he was Spanish and he was a conquistador, and he began his journey, that was led by Pizarro, the legendary Pizarro. Wow, who was looking for El Dorado, and we all know about Pizarro. Pizarro was a BMF, a murderer. I mean, that guy was a straight out gangster. And as a matter of fact, I think that Isabella and Ferdinand actually took him out, got Pizarro out of prison to go lead that. I'm not sure. I can't remember. But anyway, so the person who to do his name was to do search the Amazon was Francisco de Orellana, Orellana, and he did that in 1541. And he's a Spanish conquistador. He broke off with Pizarro. Pizarro was going off down to killing the Incas and taking their gold. And I guess this guy decided that his mission was to go into the Amazon and document. And the thing is that it says here that he was looking for the land of cinnamon. They said, what does it say exactly here? It says, began his journey as part of an expedition led by Gonzalo Pizarro. No, but Gonzalo Pizarro is different than Don Juan Pizarro, right? They could be related. Gonzalo is not Don Juan Pizarro, right? Or is it Don Juan Pizarro? Am I wrong in saying Don Juan Pizarro? I know the name Pizarro is not Bizarro. Anyway, to search for the land of cinnamon, and the mythical city of El Dorado. So that has to be the same Pizarro. But this guy, Francisco de Orellana, split off and went down to the Amazon, and then he wrote down everything, and he went back to Spain. And then 100 years later, they sent people to go investigate what he wrote, and they said there was nothing there. There's nothing there. And what happened is that European diseases wiped them out, among other things too. I mean, it was probably not just the European diseases, but it was the diseases followed by other existential reasons, probably, right? Let's see. If the legends are true, they were forced to go west on the Amazon because of the wind. That's the sail stuff again. Well, no, at that time. Okay, so Pizarro didn't go in the Amazon as far as I know. He went down. He went down onto the western coast of South America, and he went down to conquer Montezuma and the Incas and stuff like that. I think Francisco, like a lot of times they would go with like 10 ships or something like that, and they would send 2 ships. Okay, you take these 2 ships and you go up the Amazon. These 8 ships over here, we're gonna go do this, and stuff like that. So as far as I know, from what I'm sussing out here, that this was a separate journey. I never heard of Pizarro going down the Amazon. I did hear of Orellana, Francisco de Orellana. I knew about that, like you said it. Who was that guy who went down there, and 100 years later they couldn't find anything? I knew exactly who you were talking. I mean, I knew what you were talking about, and so now we found out the information, and the information was this guy Francisco, not the guy that was looking for the land of Z. Right? You heard about that too, right? They made an American movie about that English guy looking for the land of Z. Like, I guess he was looking for, I don't know what he was. I think he was looking for gold too. He ended up taking his, I mean, it's a true story too, right? He ended up taking his son, and I think they got ate by cannibals. Hold on a second. Let me get back to the chat here and see what we got. Okay. May I ask you, do you like history? Well, yeah, man, I like history. I'll tell you why I like history. Okay, I'll answer that by asking you a question. And the question is this: do you like history? Oh no, 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 that's not the question. Do you like stories? Do you like movies? Well, the greatest story and greatest movie is the history that we wrote. All the wars, all the love stories, all the things that we've done. It's a story. So history is not something that you learn because you're forced to learn it. You learn it because it's an incredible story. And there's so many things to be learned about it that actually the history, like they say, history repeats itself, but you learn stuff from history that could save your life. So yes, I like history. Yes, history is written by the victors to a very a large degree, right? So, and that's something we can definitely talk about. Like, what are you speaking in specifically? History is written by the victor. Would you be speaking like saying history is written by the victors if you're like considering the fact that Spain and Portugal pretty much discovered North America. They didn't discover it, but they're the first Europeans to get there, North and South America, and somehow North and South America, well, at least North America, ended up in English-speaking hands because they lost a war. So history was written by the victors, even though North America was being chopped up not just by the Spanish or the Portuguese. You had the Russians. The Russians had there was the Russian Empire that was in the Pacific Northwest, which was in Alaska and Pacific Northwest, right? They had the Swedes. They had New Sweden, which was in the Hudson Valley, right? They had the French. Well, I think I understand what you're talking about. World War II and the Allies took a lot of credit for Russians. So, generally speaking, this is if you are a fan of history and you understand history and you read history, right? That idea that the Allies the took the glory of who really won World War II from the Russians does not come from historians. And if it does come from some sort of a historian, it comes from some historian with some sort of a motive to sell some sort of a book that's full of shit, right? Obviously, 22 million Russians died fighting World War II. 6 million Jews died. The Americans didn't enter the war until I think what year? 1942. But that war had been fight. They'd been fighting World War II since 1936, right? Because America had a policy of isolationism at the time. We didn't want it. The United States didn't want to get involved in the war. They hoped that they would settle it themselves. Wars are, at that time, the United States had tremendous amount of resources, right? And so it was not financially in the interest necessarily of the United States to use its resources to go fight a war. And also at that time, there were a lot of sentiments floating around the American governments, the American government, that were actually Nazi sympathizers, So that's, you can read about that too. We'll talk about that as best as I know. Like Ford, the guy who made Ford cars. He was a Nazi sympathizer. May we start again? What do you mean, may we start again? America had it easy compared to the rest. Well, comparisons are always easy to make, so like comparisons don't really get you. There is what is and what isn't, right? So to compare is to engage in the peripheral of one of the seven deadly sins, which is envy. Okay, so Gene, I see you say right. They almost gave part of Japan to Russia. Imagine Japan under Russian rule. Well, did you know that Russia and Japan fought a very bloody war, and it wasn't much longer before World War II or World War One. It was the Russo-Sino War, and they fought that war. And they were fighting over the Kuril Islands and the Hokkaido and Northern Islands and stuff like that. Oh, okay. Well, hey, I don't have all the facts, and I certainly just, talk from things that I've learned. If you know something different and can correct me, I'm more than willing to be corrected. Please correct me. I That's what this whole engagement is about. I'm not professing anything. I just like to talk about it. You know. But I do know that Russia and Japan had a war, and it was a pretty horrific war. I think that was around 1917, or before 1917, because 1917 was the Bolsheviks. Yeah, they still have disputes. Just like, like there's always disputes, man. There's going to be the Chinese have disputes over the islands in the Southeast Asia, Taiwan, and stuff like that. So long as there are people who have tremendous power, they will always try to influence and get more power. You know. But I don't know. History is amazing. Have you looked at let's see. I don't know. What's your favorite history? Like, do you watch history chat? Do you watch history on YouTube? Because I do. I watch a lot of history on YouTube. I make history videos on YouTube as well. Um, so what's your go to? What's your main go to? World War II is your favorite history. Okay, World War II. World War II is your favorite history. Why? If you don't mind me asking. Why is World War II your favorite history? I'm looking at the chat, and obviously taking a little bit of time to type the answer, but I'm waiting to find out why you think World War II is your favorite, or why you say World War II is your favorite history. World War One with the tunnels is fun to learn about. Well, that's a very small part of World War One. In respect of my great grandfather, is respect to your great grandfather. That's why you are a fan of World War II. Well, I can understand what you mean by that. You know, um, And Gene says his or her great grandpa too. Well, you guys are on your great grandfathers, right? So I'm going to guess you guys are probably about 20 years younger than me. Let me and just because I have the ability to speak on this thing, right, and I'm not typing, I will let you both know that both of my grandfathers were killed in action in World War II. One was killed in England, and the other one was killed in the Bataan Death March in the Philippines when the Japanese invaded the Philippines, and MacArthur's famous words were, "I shall return," but he left 22,000 servicemen there. My grandfather, being an officer at the time, there to defend the island, which MacArthur never did come back, and they were summarily died to inhumane crimes against humanity and stuff like that. So that's what happened to my grandma. No apologies. Listen, I thought about this a long time ago. Like, the way I think about it, war is terrible. War is like it's a terrible thing. And certainly, obviously, it's not something that we want. But think about it. I thought about it like this: if my grandfather on my father's side didn't die in a bombing, right? If he didn't die in a bombing in England, and my other grandfather on my mother's side didn't die in the Philippines in the Bataan Death March, I wouldn't be here on this planet. That's kind of weird when you think about it, right? So like my existence comes from their death. Yeah, let's hear it. Tell us. I want to hear your story. Please tell us. So my great grandpa was getting ready for D-Day. Oh wow. Okay. All right. Yeah, send up some hearts for that. I'm gonna send up hearts also. Okay, so he's getting ready for D-Day, and he was late for the troop carrier. And he caught another one. Okay. All right. Oh, okay. Did he survive? Did he survive D-Day? Fantastic. I'm sure he had a lot of stories to tell you when you're growing up. That's awfully nice. And your mother asked him What was war like? Well, what did he say? War is hell. Well, both my grandparents they didn't survive. One was bombed in England, and he died in the bombings in England. And my mother's father was tortured and killed in Japan after the Japanese took over the island. Um, but you know, um, I've met many World War II veterans over the years. Um, my my grandmother remarried after World War II. She married another serviceman who became my grandfather. And I mean, like my grandfather, he helped raise me. He never talked about the war, never mentioned anything. Didn't talk about it. Didn't. I mean, you knew that he was You knew that he had been in the war, but he didn't tell any stories about killing people or destruction or anything. He didn't talk about it. He just went on. He was actually a documentary filmmaker. His name is Earl Luby, or was Earl Luby. You can look him up. He did nature documentaries for CBS during the '70s. What's the lesson? What's the lesson? The lesson is, what's the lesson? Well, I mean, I guess that we all learn a different lesson, or have our versions of lessons. Well, at least he had a story to tell, right? And he went on to enjoy a nice life, and hopefully a nice life, and he took care of your mother and your father, and family and stuff like that, and he was there for you to give you life lessons that didn't have anything to do with war. Things like how to comb your hair, or how to shave, you know, or how to put your pants on backwards, or I mean on the right way, not backwards. You have nothing to apologize to me. I don't know. I mean, I don't feel like you said anything that you need to apologize for. Why should you have to apologize? You know. So I live in Thailand, right? Uh, I think I mentioned that before. I live in Thailand, right? He was in Italy, fell asleep on a post on and his company left without him, and he had to walk through Germany by himself for 2 days. Well, that's a pretty cool thing. He's lucky. You know what happened to people who fell asleep at their post back then, though. He's lucky. Lucky. You know, something bad didn't happen to him. Anyway, I live in Thailand, right? So, um, I live in Thailand, and when I first came over here was in the '90s, right? Here in Thailand, there is a very large expat community of American servicemen who were, fought in Vietnam War, right? And they just decided to stay here in Thailand after the war. Like they never went back to the United States, and I knew a number of them. In fact, had a quite good friend named Chuck Andre. Unfortunately, rest his peace. May he rest in peace. Super nice guy. He was a cook, for the army, and he told he had stories. When I say and I laugh like that, he had stories because sometimes those stories were influenced by a little bit of booze. So you have to give him a little poetic license in his stories. But he was like I knew him in his late 60s, and he was going out. He was still getting into bar fights, like in his 60s. He'd get drunk and he would go out to bar fights with other Vietnam vets. Like, I don't know. Those guys were a different breed. He ended up dying of cancer. But both my cousins fought in in Vietnam War. One lived, one did not. Was killed. One was killed in action, and one lived in the Vietnam War. I myself joined the Navy. I was in the Navy for a short period of time. Did you guys? Either one of you guys do any service? The Pacific War was absolutely nuts. Yeah, like, have you ever seen that movie, The Pacific? The Roosevelt. You ever see you ever see that movie, The Pacific? The Pacific. I graduated, or I did boot camp in Great Lakes, Illinois, which has long since been closed down. Which I didn't know, But anyway, the Pacific, yeah, you got to see that movie, The Pacific, because if you thought, if you want to find out about how brutal the what they call the Pacific Theater was. And I got that movie's fantastic. You got Nick Nolte in it, John Travolta, other actors. You watch that movie, The Pacific. In fact, if you like World War II history, and you want to watch something that is going to really, really bam, really affect you, I would even suggest you just turn this video chat off and go look on YouTube and watch The Pacific right now, because that movie it changes you. It can change you, really. You know what I mean? The Pacific. Watch that movie. You'll never be the same. Saving Private Ryan. That was a good movie. Obviously, Saving Private Ryan was a movie. But I'll tell you a story about World War II. On my father's side, right? I could pull it up. It's on my computer, but it's not on my phone. And right now we're on my phone. On my father's side, right? They were from Seattle, Washington at the time. They were bootleggers. Anyway, when my father's father joined the service, it says, "Fifth brother joins the service. Soon the sixth will join." Now, my grandfather had 5 brothers. There were 6 of them. Right, and they all joined. And to fight against Germany, right? But there was a thing called the Sullivan Law, right? I don't know if you ever heard of the Sullivan Law, but that was there were 7 sons from a woman by the name of Sullivan, and those 7 sons were all serving on the same ship, and that ship got bombed and sunk, right? And so she lost all 7 of her sons in that tragic episode, right? And I think it was Roosevelt had to meet with her, with a woman who just lost 7 of her sons. All 7 of her sons were killed in action, and he had to meet with her. And after he met with her, they made they made the Sullivan Law, right? So that was basically that if you had more than 3 brothers, like if you had 3 brothers or something, like you could not all serve on the same ship or the same theater of battle, because they didn't want the whole family to be wiped out. And this woman, her name was Sullivan, lost her entire family, all 7 sons. They do. The Sullivan Law is still in effect, right? So if you had 7 brothers and sisters who wanted to join, then you guys would not be allowed to be able to serve on the same ship. That I guarantee. You know. Anyway, guys, listen, I super appreciate chatting with you guys, but I have some things that I have to do, and let's do this again. I'm down. We'll chat more. We'll have more information about different stuff, and like I could, we could talk about like the bridge over the River Kwai and Vietnam War and stuff like that, World War II. We'll talk, and you guys can mention more of your stories and stuff like that, because I definitely want to hear about that. But right now, I do have some things that I have to take care of, and I just want to say, God bless you all. Have a wonderful, blessed day. Thank you for spending this time with me. You have helped me tremendously in my journey through life and my healing through what we have to heal with, because none of us can. We really can't do it alone. I mean, we could do it alone, but it's much better if we do it with other people. So God bless you. Love you all. Peace, love, happiness, and stay learning. Bye-bye, guys. See you tomorrow about the same time.